Gaming reviews done quick, but not as quick as this new and improved intro. Welcome to the 1 Minute Rundown. I'm OC Trinity, your host. I have fleshy joints. Beat me up and earn 15 silver points. This time we're running down Chrono. That's a 2-game series from Square Enix that started up near the end of the SNES's life cycle. The original game, assembled by what was essentially a dream team of RPG developers and other well-known figures in Japanese media, was a story that literally went through past, present, and future to prevent an apocalypse, while keeping familiar with other RPGs of the time. A sequel came around 5 years later, dropping a time travel theme in favor of a parallel world theme, and dropping familiar gameplay in terms of something more creative. While not having the same level of influence as, say, Final Fantasy VII or Pokemon, I think it's fair to say these introduced JRPGs to a lot of people, as well as popularizing the New Game Plus concept used in these for alternate endings. Both games have a huge number of fans, and now I'll take my shot at reviewing these games to see if history's been good to them. If you've played any of the Final Fantasy games on the SNES, you should be right at home here, as a lot of the gameplay mechanics were lifted straight from them, particularly the basis for the battle system. About the most notable feature this game added were team abilities. Most of the special techniques your characters learn can be combined to create some double and triple attacks. And one can certainly enjoy the story and setting, which offers relatively few surprises but leaves plenty of room for more complex analysis while still being easy to follow. But what sends this game to the top of the charts is gameplay balance. There are 6 characters you'll get, 7 if you count an optional character late in the game, and every one of them managed to be useful enough to see consistent usage throughout the game. How many other RPGs can claim that? And in spite of the game having enough complexity to let a seasoned veteran enjoy the game, it's approachable enough even for newbies, even so much that I've gotten people who didn't like RPGs to enjoy this game. In short, yes, this game does live up to the hype, and if you have any game system that can support it, you owe it to yourself to play through this game. In contrast with Chrono Trigger's less is more approach, Chrono Cross strives to stand out with innovation, and while it gets a lot more right than wrong, not all of it works. There's a large cast, around 40 playable characters, but you only play 3 characters at a time, and character skills are almost entirely changeable with few restrictions, so there really isn't that much incentive to get them all. Traditional MP has gone in favor of a system that lets you use each character's abilities once per battle with the option to equip duplicate abilities, but then there really isn't any incentive to hold back either. Team abilities are still around, but there's so few of them that you could easily play through the game without even noticing them. But the rest of the battle system, which is based heavily on combos and stamina points, is actually pretty fun. The story, which starts with the main character stumbling into a parallel world where he's already dead and ends with a theme around fate and what was meant to happen, is actually a little closer thematically to its predecessor. You can enjoy it at face value, but examining the details yields a much deeper experience. Honestly, I can't help but feel there was a little missed potential here, but the end result is a game still very much worth playing. Opinion piece time. I haven't brought up bonus points in a while, so let's talk about silent protagonists, okay? See, Chrono and Surge are some of the more well-known characters to almost never speak a single line of dialogue throughout the game. Usually the intent of something like this is so you can just imagine the character's personality as being open to however you think it should be, but it does come under fire for being the lazy way out. Now certainly this trope has some history behind it, to the point that we've got game series like Dragon Quest or Legend of Zelda as embracing it because they've essentially been around long enough to be grandfathered in. The real question I want to tackle is, though, is this still acceptable? I can think of a few cases where it really shouldn't be. On the more justifiable side, look at games like Portal or most of the Metroid series, and likely a lot of survival horror games, where the character doesn't need to speak because there's very few other characters to talk with in the first place. But what about being silent as a placeholder? I can point to a few points in the Chrono series that suggest the lead character's dialogue isn't really silent but implied. If a character seems like they're essentially being fed their decisions by someone else, that the character doesn't really have a will of their own, that's just bad form. And I've found that games with full voice acting tend to fall victim to that especially hard if it feels like another character says something that provokes a certain response. But again, there's exceptions to the rule, and most of the exceptions, well, they really seem prepared for it, and that's what this really comes down to. If you're choosing to have your heroes not speak because you're being lazy about it, that's what we usually call a bad idea. But if they legitimately have nothing to say, or no one to say it to, or quite simply the rest of the dialogue is written around that rather than against it, then you're in great shape. Silence is golden, in the right situation. That's all for Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross. Unbeknownst to most casual fans, there is a spin-off game to this called Radical Dreamers, a visual novel game whose story was adapted and expanded into Chrono Cross, though that was a Japan exclusive. Another game was rumored for a while thanks to a trademark claim on the name Chrono Break, but that happened almost a decade ago now, so I wouldn't expect much to happen there. And a few fan games actually got popular enough that Square Enix forcibly shut them down mid-development. Fortunately, these games have re-releases of their own. Chrono Trigger is on the Wii Virtual Console and got ported to the PlayStation 1 with a few animated cutscenes thrown in, and that version is also downloadable on PSN. A DS remake adds on to that with a few bonus dungeons and retranslates the script, probably making it the definitive version of the game. Chrono Cross, well, that's also on PSN at least. A fan of these games might also enjoy Final Fantasy or Xenosaga, seeing as they share some staff members. Check back in a couple weeks for the next episode of 1 Minute Rundown, where we'll feature another game with another silent protagonist. See you then, and if you don't subscribe to my channel, I'll kick your ass so hard you'll kiss the moons.